Welcome to Aquarian Diary, where we discuss issues around the emerging age of Aquarius. I'm your host, John Irving. Thank you for joining me. Greetings all, it is July 30th, 2022. In many ways, this may be one of the most significant episodes I have yet published. On July 17th, 2022, I published an episode titled Grieving for a Planet in Peril. That episode is kind of a prerequisite for this one. I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things I said there, so I recommend that you listen to that if you haven't already, before listening to this. Since publishing that episode and thinking about it, I've had something in my mind that hasn't really left as much as I would like it to, but I can't simply ignore what, in many ways, seems like it could be a distinct possibility. And that is this idea or notion or possibility of a complete breakdown of our biosphere to the point where the scope of human activity on planet Earth is severely curtailed. Now, presumably, and for lots of good reasons, that would probably imply that the Earth's population would be possibly dramatically smaller than it is right now. So thinking about that kind of a future, which again I discussed in Grieving for a Planet in Peril, it made me think that, well, maybe humanity blew it. Maybe we had a chance to address these kinds of issues, and we didn't, and this is what some of the other sources I referenced in that prior video stated, in fact. And then I thought, well, yeah, the implications of that are that as a species or as an experiment, we screwed up. We just completely blew it. Because it didn't have to be this way, right? There were plenty of other alternatives if we had acted differently in the past, but we didn't. And we didn't mostly because of stupid things like greed and selfishness and almost kind of a sociopathic, if not psychopathic, strand in our cultures and societies that not only allows people to behave that way, but in many ways encourages or even fosters that kind of behavior. And so we could consider the impacts of the climatic changes that are going to be fairly drastic in this scenario that I'm speculating on here, like a big hammer. We're getting hammered. We're getting knocked down due to our own lack of consciousness. And we will have to rebuild and start over, not quite from zero, but who knows how bad it'll get. And that could take many generations. So that will be a tough lesson for us as a species to learn. Now, maybe in the big scheme of things, this was always the plan. I don't really know. It doesn't look like it was predetermined to me because we could have acted differently under these circumstances. We could have addressed the environmental concerns years ago. We certainly knew that they were very significant and real. Our scientists did, and environmentalists have been warning us about this for decades. So it's like a reset, a major reset on planet Earth, starting over. There's a purging involved in this too, because the purging will be purging all of the energies and perhaps beings that contributed to the current state of affairs. Civilization will not look at all like what it does right now. You're not going to have acres and acres of asphalt everywhere with ridiculous big box stores and factories producing tons of crap all over the world and shipping stuff around and people flying all over the world for entertainment. Maybe we'll have clean forms of transportation in the future, but we don't right now. So this is a big thing. Now, maybe this had to play out this way. Maybe it's the only way that humanity would learn these lessons. But like I said, it didn't have to be like this. So basically, we're getting whacked. This planet will not be able to sustain the population level that it currently does. I can't see it. The agricultural methods that we've developed and employed for decades now aren't going to function the way they did in the new climate. There's just not going to be the level of food, and we won't be able to use fossil fuels or all the chemicals, the herbicides and pesticides that are wiping out insect species that are critical to the food chain. And we won't be able to mine and harvest forests or seas or oceans in the way we have. It's kind of like we had a Garden of Eden and then we just completely trashed it. The main point of all this is just that hypothetically, theoretically, humanity had this opportunity and we completely screwed up and blew it. Civilization as we know it will collapse. The biosphere is going to collapse. We've already initiated a mass extinction event, and the future will look very different from recent past. And the period between now and when it stabilizes will probably involve a lot of strife, adjustments, dramatic changes, and shocks, because we will suddenly no longer be able to sustain the level of human activity and the human population that we're familiar with. Or the economy, for that matter. The economy is out the window. Forget it. The economy, in fact, capitalism as we know it, is largely responsible for this disaster, this catastrophe. So set aside your ideological leanings. You cannot divorce our economic and financial practices from all of this activity that related to plundering the planet to the point of collapsing the biosphere. So when the biosphere collapses, so will that economy. So my point wasn't to come in here and bum you out, but I couldn't help thinking these things and drawing these conclusions and inferring or deducing from what has been discussed that that is a possible scenario, a distinctly possible scenario. And then I started to think, like I said, what does this mean? What are the implications of this, sort of on a spiritual collective level? And I can't help but conclude that what I've already expressed here in this episode is potentially valid. And it's something for people to think about. And I'd like to hear what other people have to think and say about this as well. Again, I would encourage you to listen to Grieving for a Planet in Peril before commenting. I have also done another episode on climate change months ago, and I've talked about it here and there, and I also talked about it in the recent conversation I had with Irish Granny Tarot, which is linked in my community tab. On July 30th, I published an episode titled, "You Were Right to Be Freaked Out About Trump." And in that episode, I touched on a lot of the darker themes that have become apparent to the whole world in recent history. And those themes actually apply beyond just the borders of the United States. Due to the drama there, we've all been focused on that country. But that is the kind of darkness that informs or helped create the circumstances and situations and decisions that have led us to this point where civilization itself is no longer viable in the way many of us would desire it to be. And so I think you can also consider listening to that episode and thinking about it in this context of what the hell we did to planet Earth, because it's informative. And it's those aspects of human consciousness. Whoa, strong energy. that need to be purged from our collective experience here on this planet. Because if they weren't operating in high gear, I don't think we would have ended up where we are. And things might have worked very differently. And it's not just the responsibility of people who are immersed in that kind of consciousness. It's the fact that the rest of us let it go on and let them get away with it for as long as they did. That's the other side of the coin. We didn't uphold our highest potential, the greatest standards for society and our cultures. And it has led us to this point where we need to basically get whacked hard in order to make changes that we could have easily made if we had simply maintained a higher level of consciousness. So that's really the root of all of this and the real lesson in all of this. I'm sure we'll have another chance, but we chose the hard path instead of the easy path. That's not atypical for human beings, is it? I've done that myself more than once. Finally, I also need to say that I am adamantly against nihilism. If a loved one had a serious accident and you felt there was only a 70% chance of survival, you wouldn't not call an ambulance and say, oh well. You wouldn't not call an ambulance even if there was a 99% chance they wouldn't survive. So nihilism can be dismissed quite easily. One more thing, actually. I've been resisting doing this, but my guides have been trying to inject some levity into this, and I've kind of been arguing with them while working on this. From their perspective, this is all theater. But I happen to like Earth, and I like nature, and I like pleasurable experiences more than unnecessarily difficult and challenging ones, especially when it comes to things like serious suffering. So I have a bias, and my bias is for a peaceful world that is healthy, happy, and content, which minimizes unnecessary suffering. From their perspective, they probably see that people need to go through these kinds of things to learn the lessons they need to learn. They have a different perspective. And to be fair, I needed to state this. The reason I would hesitate to include this caveat is that I would not want to promote nihilism or fatalism or apathy, just for the record. Who knows? Maybe it'll just be me and a whole bunch of woke, socialist, progressive, sexually liberated women left here, and everyone else will have been raptured. It might not be so bad. All the best. This is just some food for thought, and I couldn't get this out of my brain, so I'm putting it on here for the record. Take care. Thanks for everything, and we'll talk to you again soon.